Please rise, salute the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome. This meeting is in compliance with the Open Public Meetings Law and has been duly advertised in the newspaper as an official meeting. Roll call.
Mrs. Gardella. Mr. McCarron.
Present.
Mrs. Barocas.
Present.
Dr. Osmond.
Here.
Mrs. Rivera.
Present.
Mrs. Cass.
Present.
And Mr. Palmieri.
Present. I need a motion for approval of the agenda.
Motion. Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Are we allowed to ask questions now, or we're just?
Discussion. You said discussion.
This is a motion for the approval of the agenda discussion, so yeah, you can, it's on the agenda.
So Giuseppe, will we go through each item by item? I don't want to make, do you know what I'm saying? Like, are we going to go through the budget, or is it just, because this is a short agenda?
Yeah, Nicole's,
Are you going to
Ms.
present,
Primilli's
then we
going
can ask
to present.
questions? Thank you, I'm sorry.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Gardella.
Yes.
Mr. McCarron. Mrs. Barocas.
Yes.
Dr. Osmond.
Yes.
Mrs. Rivera.
Yes.
Mrs. Cass.
Yes.
And Mr. Palmieri.
Yes. At this time, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Mrs. Primilli for her superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Palmieri. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to hold a public hearing on the proposed budget for the 23-24 school year. So I am going to go ahead and present that from the podium. There are slides, so the board will want to turn around so that they can view the presentation. So like I said, tonight's, make sure you can hear me. Can you all hear me?
Now we can.
So tonight's presentation is on our proposed budget for the 23-24 school year. We had postponed the hearing to allow us to have a few more weeks to put together a very difficult budget. As you may remember, at the March meeting, we did approve a tentative budget that looked like this. However, if you recall, the statements of the board during that approval was that we were all approving this budget, or you all were approving this budget, knowing that we were not comfortable with this budget, that we had a lot of work to do to get to a better place due to the significant amount of cuts that were going to be necessary to get to a balanced budget. So all of you approved it, knowing that it was not where we wanted to be, we had a lot of work to get done, and that you approved it just so we could move on with the process of working on the budget, which is what we did. We have spent every day working on the budget since that tentative approval. It has been a very difficult process. As we have been presenting year after year, our state aid reductions have continued for 6 years due to the S2 legislation that was passed in 2017-18. And you will see here the schedule of the cuts that we have received, millions of dollars year after year, with an overall $18.1 million cut for the last 6 years. Next year is the last year of the S2 legislation, and you can see there what is projected for the 24-25 school budget. However, as we have seen for the last 3 years, even the projections that were originally put out for our state aid reductions are larger than anticipated, including this year, the 23-24 school budget planning year. We received our state aid, which was an additional $4 million less than we anticipated, with a total $6 million cut to our state aid. Since then, lots of voices were heard and legislation was written by some of our senators and assemblymen, and we appreciate that, to return the additional cut that we weren't expecting to us. That has happened, which brings us back to a $2.1 million cut. However, as you can imagine, year after year losing revenue like this is next to impossible to be able to not have an effect on a school district. So as a summary, we've shared this information before. The 6 years worth of reductions in revenue and state aid have had a decimating effect on our school budgets year after year. Yearly, we have operated in a cut model, reducing yearly our operational costs, yearly cutting staff, yearly postponing needed facility improvements. Imagine in your own home if you did not work to repair and keep the maintenance up of your building for 6 to 7 years of your home. It all takes a great effect over time. We constantly seek new revenue. We're constantly writing grants and looking how we can ourselves bring more revenue into the district. But remember, we also have a 2% cap on what we can raise our tax levy to be. So you're losing much more than the 2% of your budget year after year. So you end up in a cut model every year. It's just not sustainable. As you've heard me say, again, year after year, we have been advocating to have legislation change the funding formula and remove the S2 formula. It has had a tremendous effect on us. So you'll see some of the things listed here that we have done. Year after year, we have showed you what we've done. I just want to point out the last two, as these have been things that we have been doing more recently. We have been meeting with our Ocean County Executive Superintendent multiple times, weeks after weeks, meeting with the Ocean County Superintendent to review line by line our budget. We also were able to get to a meeting with the Commissioner's Office, the staff from the Commissioner's Office over spring break. We got to have a meeting virtually and get to explain the situation that the district is in and the unique circumstances. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. So here are some factors in regards to our budgeting process and what we take into consideration. Obviously, it's revenue and expenditures. That's what you're looking at in a budget. We know our revenue is state aid. We know what we've been receiving there, cut after year cuts. We have other aid that has helped us afloat. The other aid, most recent years have been stabilization aid and also our ESSER COVID funds. So that has helped us over the last 2 years to not hit this fiscal cliff earlier. However, those funds have now dried up and we find ourselves in this scenario. Year after year, we have chipped away at our surplus and using it to get us to, again, a place where we didn't have to cut so significantly to our staff and affect our students. We have now expended all of that surplus. There's no more surplus to use. And as I mentioned earlier, we all know the 2% cap on the tax levy, then which we're allowed to raise the expenses for that. So constant reduction of revenue, and then we have constant rise of required expenditures, fixed mandated expenditures outside of the district's control. You experience them in your own homes, in your own lives. Gas prices, electricity, all of those things are out of our control. The supplies we purchase, the food we purchase, you see it in I'm sure, your food order, I know I do. All of that increases out of our control. Also, the tuition increases for out-of-district students. We have no control over that either. And obviously, the other increases that we have in the needs that we see that our students have, all of which we must have in the district. Need to have electricity. We also have 13 buildings that we need to keep open and operational and make sure that they are functioning and safe for everybody. We have our needs. We have our curricular needs, our extracurricular needs. We know how important extracurricular is to our students and the whole child. We have our facilities needs and our security needs. Think about the last 5 years of how much additional security we have put into the building including personnel, cameras, swiping machines, all of which we have received no additional funds for. But yet we keep getting cut in state aid. How could we do without security? Also, inflation. Again, all of you have seen this in your own personal lives. Over the last 2 years, it's been fluctuating between 6 and 8% inflation in just about everything. And our enrollment, and now the reasons for S2 cuts were supposed to be because of the significant enrollment declines and equaling that out, and you'll see a little bit later on in tonight's presentation. We've sort of stabilized right now a little bit. You know, we lost some over the last 6 years for sure, but nothing to equate to what we've seen in our state aid cuts. Next slide. So we thought visually it would be important for the public and the board to just see a breakdown of the general budget expenditures there, and you can just see the majority of what we spend our money on is what we should be spending our money on is our students, the program, right? The regular programming of instruction for our students. And obviously, as you can imagine, the other largest portion of the expenditures are for salaries. We have a lot of staff that we need to pay for their salaries and also their increments in their contracts and for health benefits. So that is the majority of the expenditures you see in a district. And then you can see there a little bit less special education, transportation about the same percentage of the pie there, and then the operations of the buildings and the facilities about 9%. And then you see a breakdown of some of the much smaller portions of our expenses there, including the other, which is 1%. You can see just what makes up that other, central administration, staff, ROTC, basic skills, those types of things. So we just thought it would be a really easy way to see how our expenditures spell out across the district. So what you see here is a graphic representation of the state aid in New Jersey since the start of S2. So what you see at the top is the change funding across the entire state of New Jersey in regards to state aid, and you can clearly see it's going up. However, for Jackson, you see there, our funding has been going down. While the state aid money has been going up, for the most of the state, ours has been declining pretty rapidly there. You see some significant losses there, 10% and 12%. And what I had mentioned earlier to you, during those 2 years, 21, 22, and 23, we did not hit the fiscal cliff there because of the ESSER COVID funds and the stabilization aid that we applied for that we were awarded. Had we not received that money, we would have been in this crisis, budget crisis that we are now facing for the 23-24 school year. This slide was also in the tentative budget, just pointing out again the loss and the percentage of change over time in our state aid cuts that equates to about a 33% reduction in state aid since 2017-2018. And remember, I said our enrollment has dropped since 2017 and 18, and that made sense when we dropped, below a certain percentage, but notice it's 11.9%, maybe 12%. So our cut has been 3 times the amount of loss of enrollment. That doesn't equate at all to what our cuts should have been if it was based on enrollment. So over 6 years, just a reminder of what we've lost. There's been a lot. We have been reducing every year. 151.5 positions eliminated, mostly through attrition and retirements. Our goal is always to save as many teachers, as many staff members. They're all important to us. And so we try to do it where it makes sense when we have retirements or resignation. But that's a huge loss. We've also been very wise in how we spend. There is something called the adequacy budget. You'll see the definition of what that means up there in the gray box. So every school district in the state calculates what would be necessary, funding level in order to provide an efficient education to our students. To every student in the district, that's what is referred to as adequately funding. So we are $9 million just this year under adequacy in spending. for our students in comparison to other school districts across the state. It's going to be even higher than the $9 million next year. And we are also the 14th lowest in the state for a cost per pupil expenditures. So we try to be physically and fiscally responsible for how we are spending our money. So you see the reduction and the constant reduction over the 6 years of revenue. I mentioned the expenditures and the things out of our control. We work hard to reduce the expenditures that are in our control, but many are out of our control, which include increases in our transportation needs, increases in meeting the needs of our ELL students who have increased over time as well. You've seen this slide before. Next slide, please. So with our increasing expenditures due to inflation, things beyond our control, we had to, this budget cycle, really analyze every possible option that was in front of us, including the rumor that's been out there for ages in regards to selling Rosenauer School. So Rosenauer Elementary School is a smaller elementary school. It's intended to be a smaller elementary school. And for those of you who know it, it's a wonderful neighborhood school. It's quite quaint and lovely. Many students walk to that school because it is a neighborhood school. We do not bus many students there at all. But we did our due diligence. We reviewed to see what kind of savings we may get, whether we sold it or rented it. And there are some savings for energy, not a lot, but there's some. The most important thing that when we looked at this was that where would those students go? We don't have space in our buildings right now. We have our preschool students in our elementary schools, and we have brought back a lot of out-of-district students back into our schools. Currently, there would not be space in the two closest elementary schools to Rosenauer, and obviously we wouldn't want to send students at this point way far across town. We also still have 30 trailers in our elementary schools that are being used because classrooms are full within the building. We also needed to consider all those walkers. They would have to be bused now, which would be an additional expense. So at this time, we determined closing the school was not best for the district for the 23-24 school year. Those are the reasons why. I want to make sure everybody hears that. We will not be closing Rosenauer for the 23-24 school year. So what does all of this mean? We spent months working to have the least effect on students during this budget crisis, and it has not been easy. We have reached the fiscal cliff, and after 6 years, we've lost so much, and yet we still have to lose more. So the impact that we will see in the school district for the 23-24 school year is a loss of a staggering 64 positions in this district. That's on top of the 151 and a half we've already lost, coming to 215 positions. That is a reduction across all staffing. You see them listed there, administrators, certified, non-certified. We've reduced yet again our school budgets. We've again put on pause any Tier 1 capital projects unless they're related to safety and emergency reasons. We have reduced much needed upgrades to our technology department. As you know, technology is used for everything. Due to the reduction in staff, we will see class sizes increase. Kindergarten at 20, these are average sizes. Grades 1 through 5, 26, 6 through 8, 28, and 9 through 12, 30. Certainly not what we would like to see for our instructional classrooms. We will have a reduction in some extracurricular activities. We will be eliminating the transportation to practices for off-site sports. There will be reduction in many assistant coach positions for many of our sports. We took this approach so that we could keep the majority of our athletic programs for our students, so that our students can participate in athletics. Assistant coaches, as we hopefully will get more revenue, we can put those assistant coaches back easier than we can put back a whole full sport. And that whole full sport being cut has a dramatic effect on students. So we took this approach to keep our sports available for our students, and obviously, ideally, it would be great to be able to put many of those assistant coaches back. We do have a reduction of 2 district sports. Ice hockey, as there are very low participation numbers and a high expense to that, and gymnastics is very similar. But as I had said, we have been working day in and day out for the last few months on this budget. Everything that we propose, we always try to see, is there a way around it? And just hot off the presses, I'm hearing there may be some possibilities to do something with both of those that could help save those programs. So we remain hopeful, but right now, in order to meet this budget, that's demonstrating a cut. And it's the same with everything when we cut it in a budget. If we receive more revenue, we're able to put things back, that's what we do. But in order to meet this budget, these are the things that are being reduced. Painful. In order to balance the budget in the face of our challenges, even those cuts that I just explained was not enough. We still were not at a budget. We just couldn't cut it any deeper because we knew this was not going to bring our students an efficient education. It was wrong. It was not giving them everything that they deserve and they need. So you can see the imbalance. Even with the cuts, we are still in a place where we have not balanced our budget due to the loss of revenue. As I said, we were not going to introduce a budget with more cuts than what we just presented. We have been working with the county superintendent for months now, several meetings with him. He has sat with us and gone through our budget line item by line item more than once. And he supports the fact that this district has been fiscally responsible and that we have a revenue problem. With that, he also supports the application for a loan from the Department of Ed in order to not have this district not have an efficient program for all of our students. So we are seeking a loan. The loan is an application or a letter. Both the Department of Ed and the county superintendent have submitted it. So we are confident that we'll be moving forward with a loan. The loan is a 10-year loan, and they have recommended that that loan will be interest-free and the payments will not start till the 24-25 school year. It really is the only mechanism the Department of Ed has to support the district at this point. Any changes to a funding formula have to be done with legislative action. Why is this loan necessary? I think I've explained it in regards to we can't cut anymore. We've lost way too much over 6 years. Cutting any more unravels the school district. We did, when we submitted our letter, say we were with great anguish that we were seeking this assistance, that we had no other choice. As you know, we cannot raise the revenue ourselves any other way. We only have the 2% tax levy increase, and then just to keep cutting. Those are our only mechanisms. We have hope. There's been a lot of advocacy work happening to change the S2. I'm sure you've seen it in the papers. We have hope that that will be fixed for the 24-25 budget. We have hope that we'll have more balanced formula moving forward for state aid, and that we'll get fairly funded, that we'll get increase in state aid in those things that we have seen increased numbers in, such as ELL, special education, transportation, and security. We have hope. but hope is not a solution. We can't just move forward with hope, and we don't want to continually have to take loans from the Department of Ed. Therefore, next slide, we are making the recommendation to put and seek a special question on the November 7th ballot to raise an additional $4 million for the general fund for 23-24 school year, and these taxes will be exclusively used to add the following positions. These are positions above what we currently exist within the district. The tax impact on that special question is about $96 a year on the average assessed home in Jackson. If this is approved on November 7th, it results in a permanent levy tax-based change of the $4 million. And then we get to add these positions to our district year after year and keep them. And I'd like to explain a little bit next about why we chose these positions. It is all based on the need that we currently see in our school buildings. As you know, the mental health needs of students has increased. We're dealing with more social emotional issues, more conflict issues, and more mental health. We need more counselors. We need a better ratio of counselors per student. We also have seen an increase, if you recall, when Mr. Maluski was sharing our substance abuse numbers, we have seen an increase in substance abuse as well, and we would like to add 2 student assistant counselors who are substance abuse counselors to help address those needs we see in our school. Obviously, intervention teachers would help academic intervention and improve our academic progress. We know that we have some progress that needs to be had for achievement. These teachers would help address those gaps. The 10 elementary teachers and the 12 secondary teachers are to help reduce those large class sizes I just shared with you. That would help bring our numbers back down to a more comfortable class size for our teachers. We're also suggesting non-public student coordinator and a non-public secretary. This is with the intent to help manage the non-public funds that the district is required to monitor that the non-public schools receive, such as Title I funds. It will help mainstream it, and it will help take the stress off some of our existing employees who are trying to manage that and another job on top of it. Child study team members are to help a better ratio for our special education students. The case management would become a smaller ratio, being able to give more individual attention to our special education families. And as I had shared with you a few moments ago, our ESL numbers continue to climb. So adding more ESL teachers will help us better meet the needs of those students as well. So there was great thought behind this second question in regards to what does this district need to help improve. These would all be additional positions if that second question passes. So what is next? The budget's being voted on tonight. If approved, goes into effect July 1. We are waiting to hear confirmation of the loan, and that is written into our board motion tonight. So this budget is being approved pending the Department of Ed loan, the $10 million loan. The special question, as I mentioned before, will be put on the ballot, but before it's put on the ballot, we'll hold lots of sessions and lots of explanations for our community to better understand why and what it means to you as the taxpayer. Again, if it's approved on November 7th, we'll be able to increase those positions that are listed and assist our students in a better fashion based on their needs. If it's not approved, then we are not permitted to put those additional positions in for that budget year. Right now, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Richardson, our business administrator, and she will share the budget numbers and the budget impact.
Thank you, Mrs. Spinelli. I would like to talk about the tax levy. We collect the taxes. We don't collect the taxes. The township actually does, and I just want to make that clear. They're the tax assessor. but we've been doing this so long, we always like to calculate what the school tax would most likely be based on our budget. The general fund is the first part of our budget if you picked up a document when you walked in, and the debt service is for things that you voted for many years ago. And we haven't had a new debt service in a while, but it's on a schedule up until the year 2027. This tentative budget contains a general fund tax levy increase of 2%. That is the cap that the state allows. Our budget consists of a general fund tax levy of $93,274,419. That's an increase of $1.8 million. That, like I said, is the 2% increase. State aid is $29,738,363, which is a decrease of $7.9 million. That includes the real decrease of what we had the year before. But if you notice, there's a note at the bottom showing that the state did return $4.2 million, but it is not state aid. It was a different category. But we're considering it kind of together, but for transparency purposes, we needed to put it the way it is. We put in the state aid loan of $10,225,067. General fund is $143,660,026. That's a slight increase of $1,104,487, points less than 1%. And our federal and state programs is decreased by $6.371,501. That's a 31% decrease. Our debt, very small increase of $2,000, less than 1%. And for the total budget, it's $165,790,499, which is a decrease of $5.2 million and a decrease of 3.08%. Now, what does this budget mean to the taxpayer in Jackson? The total budget is $165,790,499, as I just said. It is actually just a 0.0005 cent increase to this school tax rate. The 2023 tentative school tax rate is 1.4203 per 100 of assessed home value. The average home in Jackson, which we call the township to find out what that is valued at $330,688. So that, our budget is only a $2 increase for the year 2023. Yeah, and it just says to go to our website for the things that are there. But that's really the tax impact of this budget that we've presented here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Richardson. So we have been forced year after year to do more with less. This has been difficult, this has been painful, this is not the budget that we want, but it has been what we've been forced to deal with and endure over this incredible loss of state aid over the last 6 years. We've been forced, and it's just a very difficult situation. We have worked so hard to, every decision we make, what is the effect on students? What is the effect on students? We feel that very painful, but this is the least amount of effect that we could have on students. And we drew the line in the sand and said we would not cut anymore and affect our students anymore, hence going for the loan for the Department of Education. It has been a lot of careful consideration. We'll continue to educate and advocate for this district to have better funding. And we are hopeful for solutions in the horizon, and we will always continue to put our students first. That is what is most important. That is why we are here. So with that, that concludes my budget presentation. Does the board have any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
I just want to talk about class sizes with you.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I would like to talk about class sizes.
Sure.
So, most educators would all agree that the smaller the class size for a student, the better the achievement will be for those group of students. And I just want to be clear that the proposed average class sizes are not necessarily I want to understand average. So if some buildings could have less than that average, correct?
Yes.
And other buildings could have more than that average.
Correct.
And the question
Not
that we're
even
put-
just some buildings, I'm sorry,
Go
not
ahead.
even just some buildings, but just even different classes, particularly at
Okay.
the secondary level.
Okay.
At the high school, you may see one class that maybe has 30, you might see another class, I'll just use literacy for an example, another literacy class that has 26, and then you might see another class that has a little bit more than 30. So that's where we get the average number from.
So obviously, I like the idea of having a question on the ballot that addresses class sizes, because I think it's important for every single student in Jackson to be in a smaller class size. If this, and maybe I'm asking, how are we, let's say we don't get those teachers, so where we only get some of those teachers, or, miraculous things happen for next year and we can reduce our class sizes. How are we going to bring some equity into the classrooms moving forward? And I ask this because I have children where the class sizes will be above the 30, most likely. So obviously I'm concerned.
So it would be something that the board would discuss together in regards to how we move forward, looking at how to make sure that our schools are more equitable size-wise. Again, I do want to just state that some schools have capacities that are higher than others, and that we would have to look at what do we do about the students in the trailers, right? And how do we get them back into buildings? So that would be something we'd have to look at in regards to where our numbers are and looking at drawing different lines for probably redistricting. Did you have another question?
I think that, you guys did a great presentation, so thank you. I like the pie chart. It was great.
I like visuals.
I'd like the public to understand, I know you've talked about this a lot, that our state aid that we receive for transportation is a really much smaller piece of that pie than we're expending out, correct?
We received $600,000 in transportation aid. Meanwhile, the calculations, so what happened during the S2 legislation is it froze all of the aid that we received. Transportation is one of those aids, so we froze us at $600,000 for these last 6 years. Meanwhile, the calculations still appear on the calculation sheets for state aid, and they do calculate us at $6.6 million that we should be receiving. However, because of the legislation of S2, we're frozen at the $600,000.
I'm excited to work, I'm obviously a new board member, but there's some areas even discussing security, how important security is just in general that the country talks about, important for our schools. And, in Jackson, we spend more on security than necessarily we get aid for, but I don't think anybody would disagree with that expenditure.
Right.
And I feel like that's a good conversation to have with our legislators and with our parents pushing for that, because it's very important.
Agreed. Are there
A
any
lot
other-
of talking. My last, I lost my train of thought, so.
That's okay. I'm here all night.
I would just like to make a quick statement on behalf of this budget, and I want to commend you, Ms. Primilli, and your entire staff for working countless hours through spring break, nights, evenings, and weekends. I know this firsthand. We've spoke on many evenings and weekends. I know this was not easy. I know that what you and your staff put together and shared with this board is the best possible outcome of a very terrible situation. So I want to commend you for that.
Thank you.
I just wanted to also point out that if anybody looks at the line items, like some of the areas go up by significant percentages, and I just, wanted to kind of clarify for everybody. If they're saying, oh, wow, like why would you spend an extra 171% on this? And just so, you don't have to, we could talk about that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to make. So again, when I had presented, I shared with you the last 2 years, we were fortunate enough to receive that additional funding, the ESSER funds, which were the as people refer to it as the COVID money, and also stabilization aid. So you'll see that that offset a lot of our expenditures last year and the year before. So you might see some lower numbers, but a high, and then you'll see for the 23-24 school year, you'll see a large increase, like 100 and something % increase. That's because we're no longer have the ESSER funds, and it now has to be charged back to the general budget. So that's the reason why you see some of those increases. Thank you for pointing that out.
My last thing I just wanted to point out, and I'm sorry for taking over the microphone. You know, obviously, it's not easy to hear how many staff positions are going. And if you also read through the line items, you know, in some areas, we do have increases in salary and wages in certain areas. And, you know, could you explain why we see those increases this year
So
when we
there's-
have so many staff positions being cut?
Yep, there's a variety of different reasons for that. One is, an example is our ESL population. If there's a certain number of students, we need to have a certain ratio, teacher per ESL student. So we may have to add teachers, and in this case, there is that happening. We also did apply some of our ESSER funds for some of our part of our salaries, and we need to put them back, for example, like an OT or speech. So they're still obviously keeping their positions, we just now have to then again move that money over to the general budget. So those are some of the reasons. The only additional staffing that we're really putting into place are based on requirements. And then, of course, we have the preschool state aid that is coming in. So any preschool positions we hire are being paid through that money, not the general budget money.
Thank you. The nonprofit, not nonprofit.
Non-public?
Non-public positions that are on this question.
Yep.
I understand it's a coordinator for Title I funds and other things. Is that also for a transportation coordinator? Is that
Nope,
determined to be separate?
It's different.
Okay.
Yep,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Yes, Dr. Osmond?
I just wanted to make sure I heard you correctly when you gave your presentation. So the loan would be a 0% interest?
That's what is being recommended to the Department of Education and the department that gives the approval for the loan.
Okay, so you haven't found out if they're going
It's
for
not
it yet?
finalized. The county superintendent told me today that that's what they recommended.
Okay, and then my second question is, did we find out yet when we'll know if we're approved for that loan?
My understanding, it takes a process to go through the right channels, and I do not have a timeline for that yet. As you know, every day I've been speaking with our county superintendent. So he believes that we will be approved for the loan, we'll receive the loan, but I do not have a timeline for when we will have that notification.
So then I have a quick question.
Yes.
So if we approve the budget tonight and we don't get the loan,
So as I had spoken to the board about this, the motion on the agenda tonight says pending the Department of Ed loan. If we do not have the loan, then we do not have a budget. That's the way you're approving
Well, I
it
know
tonight.
people are watching at home, and we're thinking it. What happens at that point if they do not give the loan?
So I wish I had all of the answers. As you know, that we've not experienced this before, but my best guess would be we wouldn't have a budget, and either they would tell us, you got to go back and cut more, or we wouldn't be operating a school district. And I don't believe anybody wants that. I am optimistic that we will be receiving the approval for the loan. Yes.
So I'm not sure if this is possible, but I'm wondering if we could put together a calculator for our website for the families at home. So I know you showed an average home assessed at $330,000. So this way, sometimes people are visual, and this way they can plug and play the numbers, maybe because people could look up what their actual home is assessed at, and this way, prepare for what their future, tax would look like every year.
Sure, we can look into that.
Thank
I
you.
agree. Lots of people are visual.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions from the board? Okay, thank you. That concludes my superintendent's report.
Thank you, Ms. Permilli. I need a motion to open public forum on the 2023-2024 budget only. This forum will be for questions on the budget only.
Motion.
Second.
Please sign in and state your name and whether or not you are a Jackson resident. Each person is allowed a maximum of 5 minutes to speak. No person may speak more than once on a topic until all others have been heard.
Oh, okay. Okay, got it. Okay. My name is Jonathan Carlin. I live at 5 Wintergreen Court. I am a resident of Jackson. My questions tonight are in regards for the budget in terms of the Jackson Child Care Academy rates for the upcoming 23-24 school year. Looking at the rates that were published at the previous board meeting, for a family, for myself to send 2 kids to Elms will go up 71%. That is a total of $474 more per month. I am currently paying $668 per month. My new rate next year will be $1,142 per month. Again, that is an increase of 71%. I understand that Jackson is not receiving the deserving funding that it should get. Having said that, childcare is a need for working parents like myself, and a 71% increase in that is unreasonable. So in terms of the budget, the few questions that I have for you is, how much was budgeted this particular school year for before and after care services above the amount paid by us, the parents? How much on top of this will be collected this year for parent monthly payments? Could someone at some point explain why the increase for next year for before and after care services have skyrocketed to rates that are completely unreasonable? This program, in all honesty, should probably be fairly self-funded, and with the amount that we are putting in already for what is being offered in terms of what the kids do during morning and after care, again, a 71% increase doesn't seem right. Another question I have is, the monies that we are paying for this service, are they being subsidized for other programs or for other students, for other various reasons? So there. Another question are the books open to the public to see the itemized costs to the before and after care expenses when the monies are actually collected from parents? And then lastly, how much is being budgeted for the 2023-2024 school year? So I know that's a lot of questions. But again, the other issue I also have is there was little to no notice about such a drastic increase in these particular prices. I only came about it because I randomly looked on the board minutes for a various reason, and unfortunately I think we know most people don't look at the board minutes on a consistent basis. There was no email from the school district, which I received tons of emails, tons of phone calls for just about everything, but there was absolutely nothing for this. And I'm just kind of curious as to why, with such a drastic increase, that there was not an email or some kind of phone call to warn parents that this is drastic in terms of what a working family needs to pay. This isn't what we want to, this is what we need due to our jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll address it at the end of the public forum, all questions in regards to anything asked. Any more questions from the public on the budget? Seeing no one come forward, I need a motion to close public forum. Oh, I'm sorry. Come on down.
Good evening, Amy Howells, Jackson resident, kids in McCullough and Rosenauer. I spoke at the last one, begging you to keep Rosenauer open. So I just want to thank you. It means a lot to hear those words that school will be there next year, at least for next year. We'll take it year by year. So thank you for all of your work that you've done on the budget. I applaud all of you. I don't want to be in your shoes. Very difficult. I just have one question on the loan. So you said it was recommended for a 0%, and that if we don't get the loan, there's no budget. What if they come back at the loan and they say it's whatever, 6%? Is the loan still going to go through and the budget still goes through? So hopefully I made that, hopefully that's, you get what I'm saying there. So that was my only question on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, once again, we'll answer these questions at the end of the public forum on the budget. Are there any additional questions? I will wait a little longer this time. All right. Seeing no one come forward, I need a motion to close public
Motion.
forum.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Ms. Primilli, did you want to address any of these questions directly?
Sure. I'll give a short answer to both of them, but we certainly can always continue a conversation after the board meeting as well. So in regards to the childcare, I know I've received a few emails, also from you, sir, in regards to the childcare rates. So obviously, the intent of the district is not to burden any families. That's not our goal here, but we did need to raise our rates in order to make sure that we could keep a program and sustain a program. In regards to your questions, specific questions, I don't have that information in front of me, but we certainly can get it to you, okay? We did do a comparison of districts around us, and many of the districts who use the YMCA versus using their district employees, such as Manchester and Brick and Toms River. And their prices are still much higher, well, in some cases, mostly higher in all of their areas for childcare, including Plumstead. So I know it's not what anybody wants to see as an increase, but it was in order for us to keep a program, sustain a program, and be able to continue to offer it, we knew we needed to raise prices. I have responded to a few of the emails this morning. I was busy obviously all day working on the presentation, but I did respond to a few of the parents with this question in regards to, we do keep an open ear, we hear what you're saying, and we're looking to see if perhaps there's some other things we could do in regards to maybe a little bit larger percentage of a decrease for like a second child or a third child. But we will continue to assess it. It was, again, not intended to cause a burden, but it was intended to be able to keep the program and sustain the program. As you know, expenses for everything go up. In regards to communication, it isn't something that we normally put out. I hear what you're saying, that it was an increase. We did post it on our district website on the child care page and put it out there, just recently in regards to the tuition rates. But you are correct, we did not send out a broadcast for that. It's not normally what we would do in that case. But again, we can get you some of those numbers and we can continue to have a conversation in regards to childcare. But again, those raises weren't intended to cause harm, but to help us sustain a program. In regards to the percent for the loan, I would imagine if the loan came back at a higher percentage than what they're recommending, we would still need to incorporate that percentage into our loan and consider that as we began to pay it back and plan for it, which would be the 24-25 school year. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pamili. Yeah, unfortunately, with that loan, we're in a rock and a hard place. So we're in the hands of the state.
Mr. Palmieri, if I could just add about, he asked a question about were the records available, and the records are available on our website. Our audit reports are posted on the website every year. Okay.
All right. I need a motion to move finance.
Motion. Second.
Discussion? Okay. Roll call.
Mrs. Gardella,
Yes.
Mr. McCarron, Mrs. Barocas,
Yes.
Dr. Osmond, Mrs. Rivera,
Yes.
Mrs. Cass,
Yes.
and Mr. Palmieri.
Yes. At this time, I'm going to open it for board comments, starting with Mr. McCarron.
Just wanted to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Thank you to Ms. Permilli and the administrative staff for getting us to where we are right now. With the budget, I know a lot of time and hard work came into play with making this current budget. Thank you.
Ms. Barakis?
Yes, I too wanted to thank Ms. Permilli, the admin, and the rest of her staff for working diligently, working collaboratively to come to our budget this evening. And it's not exactly probably where we all want to be, but I appreciate the time and effort that you guys put in to get us to where we are today. So thank you for thinking of our children and everyone else. Thank you.
Ms. Rivera?
I want to thank you all for attending tonight's meeting in person and live stream, your input, your comments. I commend Ms. Permilli and her staff for working tirelessly for this budget process, and everyone have a wonderful evening.
Ms. Gardella?
Just want to say thank you for coming out tonight. I think that, the board is going to be looking at everything that concerns our students and our families, and I just want to thank the administration for dealing with a lot of questions for me. I appreciate it, and, it helps us all to understand where we're at, and I think that's what we're really looking for is to be a community and understand the pages that we're on and making sure that we're putting our students first in all the decisions that we make. So thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Dr. Osmond?
Just wanted to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and thanks to the administration. They really have been working very hard to, we're in a bad situation trying to make it where students hopefully won't realize what a bad situation we are in, and I think they're doing the best that they can given the situation. So thank you, and thanks to Megan for dealing with my coughing. Sorry, all meeting. Sorry.
Ms. Cass?
I want to obviously thank everyone for coming out tonight, and I want to thank Mrs. Pormilli and her team for doing an excellent job and an excellent presentation. We had to make some tough decisions tonight, and I find it really sad that the governor has denied our district over $18 million in the past few years with S2 cuts, which now puts us in a position to take a $10 million loan, which makes no sense. You take, and then we have to give back. In a time when he touts mental health and students as a top priority, he puts our district in a dire situation. We lobbied to the county superintendent. We tried to meet with the governor directly several times. He was never personally available. We've been fiscally responsible, and yet here we are today. I will state again, we have a unique transportation issue. Besides Lakewood, there is not another town in the state of New Jersey that has a non-public transportation cost as high as ours. This year it's $4.5 million, which is about half of that loan. Next year it is expected to go up to $6 million. It's over 26% of our overall transportation costs, and it's going to continue to grow at a rapid rate. This is unsustainable for any district, not just ours. And the state refuses to hear our pleas. Not only do they not listen, but they cut our state aid and our transportation aid significantly. Other towns with far less needs receive tremendous amounts in transportation aid compared to our measly $600,000. To clarify, that $4 million that the governor claims to have given back to us this year, that's just it, they gave it back. That money was an unexpected increase in our S2 cuts. We were anticipating $2 million, and it was increased to $6 million without any explanation. So do not be fooled that we received any additional extra funding. They took back what they weren't supposed to take in the first place. That was not a gain, it was just a relief. We have been called out in some media outlets as having a bloated budget. I certainly do not see that. We have programs for our students, programs that these children desperately need, especially after the pandemic. So cutting staff, programs, sporting teams, and increasing class sizes, all while taking a loan, which may or may not have interest, is not in the best interest of our students. As a resident, as a taxpayer, and as a Board of Ed member with students in this district, I'm deeply dissatisfied with our current government administration. It's shameful. And it's the students that are going to suffer.
Thank you. The 2023-2024 budget that we just passed is the best possible outcome of a very bad situation. The loan we have requested from the Department of Education in the amount of $10.2 million is a stopgap. With the last 6 years of S2 cuts decimating our budget, there are no other options to prevent the total unraveling of our district. Moving forward, we need our state legislators to develop and pass a fair and equitable school funding formula, one that properly funds every school district. If not, this problem will continue to persist. Even with this loan, we still had to make hard decisions for the 2023-2024 school year by cutting over $5 million from our budget. These decisions never come lightly, and they hurt every time. With that being said, we did stop the district from unraveling. However, there is still more work to be done, and we will continue to do that work. Thank you. Motion to adjourn.
Motion.
By acclamation.
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion, meeting adjourned.